Welcome everyone to the FIDE World Blitz Team Championships 2026. Magnus Carlsen has had a great day today with 8 wins in a row. He now faces the Chinese Grandmaster Zhu Xiangyu. They did play in the rapid section and Magnus had beaten him. Let's see what happens in Blitz. It's the English opening. Magnus opts for the g6 setup and then goes e5 followed by d6. You can see Magnus trying to move away from well-known theory, trying to just play some normal chess and outwit his opponent. Pawn to a5, stopping white from going b4, and now a3 played. The bishop comes to g7 and e3 setup with the idea of knight e2, castles, and maybe breaking in the center with d4 or f4. Magnus goes h5 and he asks Zhu Xiangyu, do you want to allow me to play h4 or you will go h4 when your light squares would become a little bit weak? Very cool move, h5. White can change their plans and go, instead of knight e2, knight to f3, because that does control the h4 square. And he does play it, a nice move there. Knight to f3, and now Magnus needs to figure out how to finish his development. Should he go knight f6? Should he go knight e7? Knight h6? h4 sacrificing that pawn? No, he goes knight to f6. And now somewhere e4 ideas are on the cards. He goes pawn to d3. Magnus castles here, and so does white. Both have castled. How should black continue here? Pushing your pawn to d5 does seem like an idea in the center. There's also plans like rook e8, trying to go for pawn to e4. Magnus goes bishop f5. Slightly provocative, you want to force white to play e4 when the d4 square does get weakened. He goes h3. White is playing really well here because with h3 he takes into control both the pieces going to g4, and if you go queen d7, I'm simply going king h2. Magnus pushes forward with e4, but here's a cool move. Oh, he goes knight h4. By the way, knight g5 was a stronger move, but knight h4, bishop comes to e6, and Magnus does something very cool. He's looking at the c4 pawn. Imagine if you try to win material this way, then bishop takes h3 is hanging. So he takes on e4 with the pawn, and Magnus takes on c4 and already has a very nice position. But this is a little bit deceptive. It may seem that black is better because of their structure, but imagine if white starts to roll the pawns on the king side, it could become something dangerous. Knight d7, a very measured move by Magnus. The knight is coming to c5, taking advantage of the d3 square. That's the thing about Magnus. He kind of tosses his pieces in the air and they all land on the right squares. That's his positional understanding. Now Zhu Xiangyu down to 1 minute 40 seconds. He's trying to figure out if what he played made sense. b3 could be an idea, but bishop takes c3 is hanging. You may want to consider some compensation. Take here, rook opens up, give up your rook, then get this diagonal for your bishop. Well, he decides to first protect his knight, but now knight to c5, jumping in. Magnus can do so. Yes, he plays knight to c5, pawn to b3. And the thing is, now bishop sits on d3, attacking the e4 pawn slightly. Rook comes to c1, and now rook e8. 1, 2 and 3 attackers, only 2 defenders. Well, what should white be doing here? Defending the e4 pawn is not at all easy. Playing your pawn to f3, that does look ugly, but it saves the pawn. And later, if you can get rid of this bishop, you may want to play f4. Bishop e5, Magnus trying to provoke f4 so that and then dropping back so that the e4 pawn once again becomes weak. I mean, you can go king f2, but then I believe some sacrifices on g3 could happen. He goes f4. Magnus drops his bishop back. Once again, the same problem. What to do about the e4 pawn? This time Zhu Xiangyu goes knight d5. Magnus goes after the pawn on e4. He will be a pawn up. You can take bishop e4. Magnus trying to think whether knight e4 is better or bishop e4, and in doing so, it's taking a bit of time. He can afford it. He was a minute ahead on the clock, now 30 seconds ahead. Bishop e4, a nice move. Bishop c3. Zhu Xiangyu getting a bit of activity for the pawn that he's given up. And now, do you take on d5? He takes d5. That's just solid understanding of chess, to give up your bishop there. Queen f6, attacking the rook here. And now rook c2 played. The bishop on d5 is extremely strong, so you can't take here because the bishop protects that pawn. So he jumps knight d4. What a move by Magnus. Queen takes, pawn takes, the rook is hanging. You could take pawn takes directly here, but then there are all these tactics with rook e1, queen e1 and queen d4. He goes rook f2. Magnus quickly brings his knight to b5, now threatening a fork here. Incredible play by Magnus Carlsen. I mean, that's just amazing chess. He goes bishop c4, knight jumps to c3, queen a1. Pinning here, but d5. d5, bishop moves, take the pawn on b3. Yes, plays it d5. Magnus is playing like stockfish. The accuracy is simply off the charts. Look at this move. Rook e3, and knight e2 wins the queen, but Magnus goes knight e4. He allows the trade of queens and gives white some respite. Rook c2 played because now the c7 pawn is under pressure. You can play knight e6. You can also play knight takes b3. b6 is also an idea. You can see Magnus there slightly uncomfortable with what has happened. Also, kudos to Zhu Xiangyu for trying, Many would have just given up by this point. And Magnus now down to 15 seconds. Oh my goodness. He's taking too much time. b6. But b4 quickly played there by his opponent. Takes. Knight jumps back to e6. f5. Knight to d4. Rook goes back. And g5. Now the knight is taken. Takes. He takes back. And now the resulting position is clearly better for black because the knight is excellently placed on f6. The pawns are doubled. And rook a4 played. He pushes his pawn to b5. And now rook e7 was threatened, so king f8, rook c1, knight e8, bishop goes back, he takes the pawn on h5. White has now a passer here. Even though Magnus will take the h4 pawn, he will be still left with another h3 pawn. Magnus takes the pawn, bishop g4, kind of trapping the rook. Knight comes in. King f2, beautiful move. If you take here, I go king g3 and then take back. Knight e8. Not the kind of moves that Magnus would have liked to make. He's losing the thread of the game. White is fighting back. Zhu Xiangyu's king is coming in. King takes d5. A check to the king. He goes back to e4. Rook d2 played. And now he was trying to go for the h pawn. But first asks the rook to leave from there. Rook d5. Magnus goes back. Do you really want to care for this b5 pawn, or you just want to go after your h pawn? He tries to defend it. But Magnus goes check. King d2 and now chops off the pawn on f5. The h pawn starts to run. Rook here, king e3. Magnus is like, I want to move my knight. But the c7 pawn is weak. Finally is able to get the knight into the game. But look at that rook attacking the f7 and c7 weaknesses. f5 played, rook goes to g1. Now trying to again attack c7. Rook h3, king comes to f4. Zhu Xiangyu's focus impeccable. Rook check by Magnus. Do you go all in? King g5. Seems fine. Yes, he goes in. Rook h2, the bishop comes up, takes the pawn on b5. Xiangyu is like, take as many pawns as you want, Magnus. I'm putting my faith on my h pawn. Check, king d6, and now you can pin the knight. I mean, you can even block with bishop h5. He's calculating there. He goes rook d1, and he's played on these 12-13 seconds for so many moves. Magnus goes king. He's not sure. He goes king c5. He's almost going to play king e5. And now rook f1, defending the bishop. Knight goes back because Magnus wants to win. King d4. And now bishop h5, blocking the rook's path. Still a draw because the knight can always go check and stop the h7 pawn. Takes on f5, check. King f6, knight f8 are the only move. But he blunders rook h2. He takes the knight and it's all over. Magnus resigns and he's laughing there. But what a game this was. What amazing play by Magnus in the first half. And what incredible play by Zhu Xiangyu. That fighting spirit towards the end shown by him to beat Magnus. In the end, he said sorry, but look what Magnus said.
Freedom begins with a choice. In 2008, we made ours. Freedom knows no borders. Step by step, we became part of the global financial system. In 2019, we went public on NASDAQ. In 2024, we built a digital ecosystem. Fintech, lifestyle, telecom, everything comes together in one unified digital space. Today, freedom is a system that shapes markets. $2 billion in annual revenue, $9.3 billion market capitalization, 11 million customers, 11,300 plus employees, 230 offices worldwide. Freedom begins with a choice, and every day we make it again. Freedom Holding Corp. One ecosystem, many possibilities.